Well, here's where we need to get personal, Nienke. So we've been talking very professional and talking about career topics, but of course, every person is simultaneously, as they're going through these career milestones, experiencing a lot of different things in their personal life.
Create your own fortune.
And we're live. Welcome, Itir. For everybody, I'm live today with the amazing Itir Keskiner. She has an amazing story to share with us today. I titled this episode of the Pre-Idea to Profit interview series, From Gangnam Style to a Life That Makes Her Smile. And smiling she is today. Just look at her. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And Nienke, you're making me smile because it feels so good to reunite with you in this context. We've both come such a long way and been experiencing so many amazing things since we last saw each other in Seoul. So I just want to know it's really a full circle moment for me to be here with you today.
Literally, like from the skyscrapers in Gangnam, Seoul to both sitting underneath a tree.
That's right.
Amazing. So I would like to dive into your life story because I think that's an amazing journey that you've been through. Starting with, how did you grow up?
Great question. Let's start from the beginning, Nienke.
Yeah.
So I'm a Turkish American born in Florida in the US. But I was fortunate to grow up really all over the world. Both my parents are global travelers. So before the age of 6, we lived in Zambia, Guatemala. We moved to Belgium for a couple of years, and I actually started my primary school in Belgium. So I've always been exposed to different cultures, different ways of living. And I think that really has inoculated me at a very early age to have interest in understanding people more closely and in really just being fascinated by all the different lifestyles and backgrounds and talents that people have.
Because that's a lot of different countries that you just named, like even before 6.
Right.
How do you feel that? Do you even remember things from those ages?
That's a good question. It's hard to say. What I'm remembering from seeing photos that my parents took at that time versus actual memories. But I definitely remember by the time I got to Belgium and starting school there and, taking a bus to school and having classmates that were really representative of the world. It really felt like a mini UN. So I remember being, really curious about my friends and all the different cultures they represented. Yeah.
And what do you think brought that to your life in a later stage?
Yeah, so I think the way it manifested later was kind of fast forwarding to my undergraduate studies. I chose to major in international affairs because I really had this inspiration and this vision that I would dedicate my life to bringing people together and helping them understand that we're more alike than we are different.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's really been a passion of mine. So I did think I was going to go into diplomacy and international affairs. And that's what made me major in that. And I went to George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and that sounds like a very logical way of thinking, right? Especially if you grew up in different places, if you love showing people how similar we are, despite like appearances on the outside that might make people think otherwise. So after you finish your studies, then what happened?
Well, I got quickly disillusioned by politics is what happened.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to study in Washington, D.C., in the seat of all the policy making and, the IMF office right down the street and the State Department across the, street from my dorm room and 6 blocks away from the White House. So really in the seat of the action. But that also meant that I got an insider's view on how politics works and how policy making works. And
Mhm.
I honestly was quite disillusioned by what I saw and realized that I didn't really want to be a part of that. I didn't feel like I could make the impact I wanted to make through those channels that I originally thought I would be making them. Uh,
Mhm.
so that really made me reevaluate. By senior year, even though I, stuck with my major of international affairs and added on geography as a double major, I I knew this wasn't that wasn't the career path I was going to pursue. So
Yeah.
then I was left with deciding what I would do instead, and
Mhm.
that's what led me to focusing in on business, thinking that perhaps it was the business world that would allow me to make the impact I wanted to make. I didn't know how yet, but it felt like another alternative that was worth trying.
Yes. So you changed real politics for office politics.
Correct, Nienke, spot on. It turns out I became a diplomat anyway.
Yeah.
I just
And I
didn't know.
think that's very true, right? Like, even though you have certain strengths and certain missions, there's so many ways you can apply that too.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And conflict resolution and, understanding what's motivating people and really diplomacy, bringing together people under a common cause. Those are all hallmarks of leadership that ended up
Yeah.
serving me really well in the business world. I just didn't know it yet.
And one
Yeah.
of the things that I love about you is that how open you are about your life and the different spins that you have had to encounter in your life and the different life choices you made. So, how was that the first part of your career, and what did you encounter?
Yeah, so again, to be fully transparent, I had no idea what I was doing, and I had that oh shoot moment of, well, now I have a degree in international affairs and I'm trying to go into business. Um,
Uh-huh.
but luckily, consulting is quite forgiving in that
Yeah.
regard, in that many consulting firms hire you for your intelligence and your ability to learn quickly. So I
Hmm.
was, able to find a role at a small boutique consulting firm in Washington that primarily served government agencies, and their top client was the Department of Energy. And I
Hmm.
happened to have done some work in energy efficiency and renewable energy conservation. And again, healing the world was always one of my passions. So I felt like, okay, well, this is a consulting firm that's at least aligned with my values, and let me just get in there and see what I can learn. That said, when I got there, it was a great company, but the role just wasn't really quite what I had imagined. It was very focused on actually IT and on building custom systems for this particular government agency to use in how they were managing their internal processes. So it was a
Hmm.
lot of client requirements gathering, which ended up serving me in the future in the marketing career that I'll talk about. But in terms of the day to day of what I was doing, I was not really interested. And about 2.5 years into working at this smaller consulting firm, I decided, well, not really interested in this work, but maybe I could at least make more money. So I went over.
And again, you're such an honest person, right? Like, okay, well, this is not
I just want
entirely
to make
my
more
thing,
money. Yeah.
but
So
yeah.
that led me to a role at Accenture, as you know, a much larger global consulting firm. And
Hmm.
I did get a substantial raise, and I
Good for
was
you.
yeah, thank you. You don't ask, you don't get, right? So
Yeah.
that was something I did early in my career that was very helpful. And the thing about Accenture that I think is really exceptional is the amount of training that they invest in their analysts and their
Hmm.
incoming classes of future consultants. So I'm really appreciative of what they invested in teaching me the basics of consulting, and really enjoyed also my peers and getting to know my coworkers. It kind of felt like an extension of the undergraduate college experience. Everyone's young and in their 20s and trying to establish their independent life. And it was a nice time in my life to be in Washington, and to be learning all these new things, even though it wasn't exactly what I had imagined.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're learning, if you're having fun, if you're getting paid well, like that sounds like a good choice to me, right?
Yeah, it was a good choice. That said, pretty early on, about 3.5 years of that later, I realized, okay, but I really have left these passions and values of mine on the table,
Yeah.
and I don't really know where to go from here. I knew that I wanted to get a professional degree and a master's degree of some kind. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I wasn't really sure in what. I couldn't really nail down a specific topic that I would want to be educated at a master's level. So once
Uh-huh.
again, I went to the default setting of business and business school.
But I think that's one of the beauties of business, that business applies in all areas of life. Even in politics, like business is still related, and improving and healing the world, like you said, your mission is business is related, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm very glad that I made that choice, although it might not have been for the textbook reasons that somebody pursues an MBA. But I got really lucky in that I applied to Duke University, and it was really the right fit for me, even though, to be honest with you, at the time I didn't really know what I was looking for in a business school. Um,
Uh-huh.
but Duke was a school I always admired, and it brought me to North Carolina. And it was an amazing experience because Duke, I think, really struck that right balance for me of having a student body that is obviously very ambitious and accomplished, but
Mm-hmm.
also very well-rounded and emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
So I think, as business schools go, it really was the right combination of things for me.
Yeah. And is it something you realized going into Duke, or is it something that you realized looking back?
It's something I quickly learned, in during the application process, and was happy to experience when I was there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that said, I was completely unprepared for what business school really is.
Uh-huh.
So again, to be fully transparent, I was so overwhelmed. The first semester, I was probably crying every other night. Uh,
Oh.
these are the things nobody tells you. So I just wanted to lay it out
So,
there.
so why were you crying? What were you crying about? Not that there's
Yeah,
anything wrong with crying. Like, I'm a big crybaby myself, and I always feel better after I cry. So in
yeah,
full transparency as well, like, I cry a lot. But why were
yeah.
you crying?
I was crying because I really missed the point of what business school is about. I was still looking at it from the lens of my undergraduate studies, where
Uh-huh.
for me, getting straight A's was the goal, when
Mm-hmm.
I was an undergrad. And, the studies and the content itself was what I thought should be the priority.
Mm-hmm.
However, in reality, as you know from attending business school yourself, the real value in business school is the relationship building, and in
Yeah.
really understanding almost real time as you're learning the content, how you would apply it in the business world, right? So the
Mm.
case approach um, is widely adopted by business schools for that reason, because they want you, even as you're learning, to be thinking about how you're actually going to apply it.
Yeah.
Um, and I was on the very young side of my classmates. Most people had at least 5 years of work experience, whereas I
Mm-hmm.
only had 3. And I just kept comparing myself to people who were much better equipped and prepared, just given the number of years of work experience they already had under their belt. So honestly, it was just, my perfectionism kicking in, me comparing myself unfairly to others, and really feeling focused on academics instead of really enjoying and embracing some of the more social aspects of business school.
Yeah, business school can be a tough place if you compare yourself to other people, like a lot of different places, right? Because there's so many amazing other people in the world and we're all unique in our own sense. But what
Yes.
made you shift then to having a better experience there?
I would say by my second year, things really started to shift because once again, while I was actually quite surprised at how quickly the focus of the business school experience became on recruiting and on getting your job, like what your next job is going to be out of when you graduate the program. While I was shocked by how quickly that all happened, I was also sort of forced to identify what I was most interested in pretty early on. And that actually allowed me to then start looking at the academics also from the lens of how am I going to use this when I graduate? And I of the coursework that we all went through, the base coursework in the first semester, marketing is really what stood out to me. And we had companies recruiting on campus for summer internships pretty much as soon as we got on campus. And the roles in the companies that really drew my attention were all around marketing and brand management more specifically, and FMCG or CPG as we call it here in the US. And so once I identified that and was able to kind of stay laser focused on what it is I want to set myself up for upon graduation, that really let me relax. And I really started to feel empowered in my own strengths to realize, oh, I'm actually really good at marketing and my classmates are looking to me. Whenever there's a brand management or marketing topic, I started to kind of build my credibility as the expert in that area. So that all started to become some good, positive, empowering reinforcement for me.
Amazing. And where did you go from there? Because I can imagine that you have so many opportunities, right? And being a very ambitious and talented young woman, how do you decide what to do next?
Great question, Nienke. So there were certainly a lot of opportunities, and I remember, again, a lot of comparing happening between my classmates of, well, who did you interview with? How many interviews did you get? What offers do you have? Who got an offer from the top companies? All of the environment was really rife with that kind of conversation. So I have to say what saved me from getting really pulled into that and potentially getting into a negative space was, again, the fact that I stayed really laser focused on FMCG brand management. So of the companies that were recruiting at Duke, Unilever was my absolute top choice by far. I was familiar with the company's products and also just having a tie back to Turkey. Unilever is very strong in the Turkish market, so I was very familiar with the brands and the household name of Unilever, which isn't the case in the US, by the way. So Unilever, the company, is not as known as the portfolio of brands it has. But anyway, I felt really compelled to focus on getting an internship with them, and I felt that Unilever really struck the right balance between doing the sort of the analysis piece of marketing, which often gets overlooked. But then
And with
also,
analysis, you mean?
I mean, really understanding the market, understanding the consumer and where the unmet needs are, and really doing the math on, what potential there is in each of the sort of different spaces that a company could pursue. So there was a lot of analytical rigor, but also very emotional advertising. Unilever, I felt like was putting out the kinds of, partnering with advertising agencies who were putting out the kinds of ads that really struck an emotional chord with the consumer. So
Mm-hmm.
while other companies were focused on product marketing and really highlighting the benefits of a product,
Yeah.
I felt like Unilever the approach in general was much more around what is the underlying need that this consumer really has, and looking at it really much more from a deeper emotional perspective, and knowing that the product, sure, is a great product, but what is it serving at a deeper level, you know? So I felt really attracted to that approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the internship, you know, at Duke is a 2-year program, the MBA program. So at the end of my first year, I interned at Unilever's New York office and on the
Mm-hmm.
Dove brand, which was a real dream, because it really is such a globally well-known, well-loved brand. And
Yeah.
I worked on the face care part of the portfolio, which was newly forming. And I worked on the global team. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
so many things were coming together because my colleagues were, some of them in Germany, some of them in Singapore. I was in the New York office. The project that I specifically was working on was about bringing a product line that had already launched in Germany over to the US, and sort of what the approach would be of bringing that product line over. So, you know, it really hit on so many of the things that I love in terms of cross-cultural communication and understanding the nuances between different markets, and you know, working on a brand and product line that was of personal interest to me too. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And I can totally see like how that actually brought back together so many aspects that you are looking for, right, in your career, in terms of the people you want to work with, the purpose and the way you want to work, the context.
Yes, absolutely. And so it felt like the right fit, and Unilever thought so too. So they brought me on with a full-time offer for when I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, you know, upon graduation back in 2009, I started my career in brand management with Unilever. And the first product line I worked on, you know, in a full-time capacity was Suave body wash and lotion, which is
Mm-hmm.
specific to the US market. But it is a value brand, you know, what we call opening price point, and has a consumer who's very savvy, but also, you know, wants the best of what she can get. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of fun on that product line, working with fragrances, and how to actually offer an amazing fragrance experience that would be on par with a luxury brand, even though
Uh-huh.
this is a value, low price product. So I got to work with famous, you know, fragrance houses in New York, to do product testing and concept testing, and to come up with the best of what we could offer this consumer.
That sounds like so much fun. And quite a change from the IT world that you were in before with the boutique consultancy firm and with Accenture.
Yes, yes. I have to say, and especially as I'm talking to you, I'm realizing this. I really got a hell of a value out of that MBA. I really
Oh,
did. Because when you really, you know, the MBA is known for being able to help you credibly make a career transition. Not that you need
yeah.
it to make a career transition, but it's one way. And wow, did I have a transformation, you know, from pre to post MBA.
That's amazing because, of course, yeah, I mean, it offers a lot of potential, but it's also a very big ticket investment, right?
It sure is, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that you feel that way. And then, how did you get from this amazing experience, Unilever New York,
Mhm.
to crossing the entire ocean into a completely new continent and country?
Yes, yes. Well, here's where we need to get personal, Nienke. So we've been talking very, professional and talking about career topics. But, of
Mm-hmm.
course, every person is simultaneously, as they're going through these career milestones, experiencing a lot of different things in their personal life. And so for me, at the time, I was married, and I had actually married my ex-husband before the MBA, so went through the entire MBA program married, um,
Mm-hmm.
and was in, New York. He was also at a big consulting firm while I was at Unilever. And, while I've talked about all of the positive things that I did love about my role at Unilever, I did also feel a ton of pressure to perform at a very high level. As you can
Yeah.
imagine, it's a very sought after role, sought after company, and I really put a lot of pressure on myself to perform. And to be
Mm-hmm.
honest with you, was really grappling with anxiety to the point where I had a full blown anxiety attack, and started seeking therapy, which was the single best thing I've ever done for myself and that I highly
Yeah.
recommend. So, of course, in hindsight, I'm able to put it in very positive light because I'm already at the other side of it where I can see how much that benefited me, even the panic attack, how much it ended up benefiting me.
Yeah.
But I was going through a lot. There was a lot actually going on during that period of my life.
And
Um,
thank you so much for also being open about this, and like also explaining that you took action and how it helped, because for everybody going through that right now, I think that's so important to know.
Yeah, I do wish more people, when they're comfortable, could be transparent about it, because it's just so helpful to hear that,
Yeah.
oh, this is normal. So many people are experiencing this. There's nothing to hide. It's just a human experience.
Yeah.
And yeah, so all of that was happening, and my ex-husband, was trying to manage his career, obviously in parallel
Mm-hmm.
to mine. Another frequent topic I get, from households with two high power careers is always trying to strike this balance. And so
Yes.
he actually started pursuing a role at Samsung in Korea.
Oh,
And
wow.
yes, he went first. So I was like, okay, this is crazy. What are you talking about? We're not moving to Korea.
So how does that go? Like, hi, honey, I'm home. Let's move to Korea.
Yeah, yeah, it was basically like, hey, I'm really interested in this role. I've been, he was pretty actively being recruited for it, to be honest. And Samsung just has such a strong brand name as well that, when Samsung comes knocking, you don't really ignore, you do
Mm.
you do hear them out and at least learn a little bit more about what that role might entail. And so, I was very encouraging of him exploring what exactly that would look like. Um, but also saying, but we're not actually going to move to Korea. So it's great that you're learning about this. Good for you. Understand your market value. But we're not actually going to do this.
Uh-huh.
um, However, uh,
Mhm.
I'm also just a person who's very objective, and I really like to have all the facts, that I can have before I make a decision. And I really wanted to be supportive and very much believed in being a supportive spouse in trying to manage, like I said, two high power careers.
Yes.
Um, so one thing kind of led to another. It did keep advancing. The conversation with
Mm-hmm.
Samsung kept advancing. And the next thing I knew, they found out that I have an MBA, that I, have a career at Unilever. I'm an expert in brand management. And so next thing I knew, I was sending my resume in, and and
And next thing you knew.
next thing I knew, we were flying to Korea to interview. um, and at each of these steps, I was able to rationally justify why we were doing it, right? So
Yeah.
all of my rationality just kept kicking in and explaining away what was happening, which was, okay, great, you're being asked for an interview. They're going to fly you to Korea. You've never been to Korea. You love world travel. This is a top global firm. Just go ahead and interview. What's the worst that can happen? So next thing I know, we're interviewing and spending, a long weekend in Seoul. And, next thing I know, we've got a very competitive, attractive financial offer.
Yeah.
Especially, going into it together, right? With two offers coming together. So I just kept rationalizing and explaining away, and frankly, pushing down and ignoring my instinctive response, which was, why the hell are you doing this? Like, this you don't want to live in Korea and work at Samsung. Those are great things for other people, but that's never been your goal. Again, while I was dealing with managing my anxiety while working at Unilever was still a place I loved working at the end of the day. I would have been happy to just keep working on how I could address my own anxiety issues while still succeeding at Unilever. So yeah, there's a lot there, but like I said, one thing led to another. The offer became too attractive to ignore. I take that.
And at the same time, like, of course, the offer was very attractive, but it also sounds, and I don't mean this in a harsh way, and again, I applaud you for the openness and the trying and everything, but it also sounds like, from a rational point of view, you did want to do it, even though intuitively, more on the inside and with your feelings, like, you didn't want to do it, so you had kind of an internal struggle going on.
Correct, Nienke, definitely. And I think another big part of my identity at that time was being a supportive spouse. So I wanted
That's also beautiful, right? Like, how much we identify ourselves with roles, being working for a certain company or being like in a certain relationship.
Yes. So at the time, I was very identified with being a good wife. At the time, part of my identity was Itir is a good wife, and a good wife would take a trade-off, and would take a sacrifice to her ideal career path, to try something different, and try to be supportive. So you're right. Those are all the reasons, I fully take responsibility for, at the end of the day, signing on that dotted line, my own contract, and saying, yes, I will at Samsung.
So how did it go? I mean, with the ex-husband, we already know that something happened there, but work-wise, how do you reflect on your Samsung experience?
Oh gosh, Nienke. Well, first I want to say I'm so glad I met you there.
Likewise.
So I got to Korea, and my very first project I was assigned to, Nienke, of course, you were a part of that team. And, I went into it, first of all, just trying to be positive and make the most of it, and I really, I sincerely mean it when I say that your being on that first project team was really critical for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean that from a few different angles, one, that you're such a supportive, open, kind person. Like, you are genuinely very kind, and always concerned for other people's well-being. So I felt that, and that felt like a very nurturing kind of relationship to start off with. And frankly, that was in contrast to an otherwise pretty unforgiving and harsh environment. So that made it all the more valuable for me. And also, the fact that we were two women on a team that was male dominated, and in a division of Samsung that was extremely male dominated, a company that's extremely male dominated. So yeah.
I remember as well, like, this huge floor where we all were working, and we being like the foreign global strategy team helping Samsung, right? And out of 120 people being 4 women.
Yes. 4
like
women.
We were joking that we even had our own toilet, right?
That's right. We each had our own sink, our own toilet. Yeah, exactly. So a very different environment than what I had experienced to date on my career path. And, none of this is to, put Samsung down or
No.
disparage it. It's just to build the context, right, around the reality of what was the case at the time. To your point, we were 4 out of 100, right? So that was just the way it was.
Yeah.
And so that was a pretty big shift for me, not to mention that prior to the transition at Unilever, I had rotated from Suave personal care over to Hellman's mayonnaise.
Hmm.
So literally I went from managing and being responsible for a multi-million-dollar marketing budget on a extremely well-established 100-year-old brand in Hellman's, getting to work with my favorite food celebrities and famous chefs in New York, and really engaging with content that I felt personally attached
Hmm.
to transitioning to Samsung, which again, Samsung has so many different, 23 different industries it operates in, so many different product lines. But I happen to be assigned to the semiconductor division of Samsung. So
Back to IT.
back to IT, and somehow from mayonnaise to microchips, like can't think of a bigger leap there, right, of
Mhm.
content that I was dealing with. So I was really just trying to understand an entirely new industry, one that I wasn't personally interested in, which we do as consultants all the time. Not to knock that, but that in combination with a completely different company environment, a completely different country and culture, and moving literally across the world, not having any friends or family, not having my support network, all of it at once, plus trying to manage a marriage, and make a marriage work, was a lot of strain, a lot to ask all at
Yeah,
once.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. And when did you decide you wanted something different for yourself?
Well, I am a commitment girl, so I committed to a 2-year contract with Samsung. And
Hmm.
even though I was having an immense amount of difficulty, really because I still couldn't reconcile in my brain, or in my spirit, I should say,
Hmm.
um, this conflict that we talked about earlier, of all the rational reasons why I made this choice, but all of the reasons in my heart and my soul that it didn't feel right. I wasn't at the time, in real time, able to process and reconcile that disparity. But I committed to the 2 years. So I knew I was gonna stay, because again, I identify with being a person who sticks to her commitments.
Yes.
And I just started thinking about my life afterwards, and now I'm so grateful that Korea gave me the opportunity almost to step outside of my life, like to break the trajectory that I was on
Hmm.
in such an abrupt and extreme way, that it helped me to actually see things much more clearly.
Hmm.
Um, and with that clarity, I was able to also see that my marriage was not salvageable, and was not going to work, as much
Hmm.
as I, again, as a commitment person, just couldn't believe, that I would even entertain divorce. When you get
Yeah.
married, you don't think that you're going to get divorced. And so
No.
I also spent those 2 years in Korea trying to understand what was happening in my marriage and what it all meant and what action it would lead me to next. And it
Hmm.
really took the entire 2 years for me to gain the clarity to say, I really have to call this. I really
Yeah.
need to see reality as it is. And we're on two different paths. And again, I'm so grateful to Samsung and to Korea for highlighting in such a clear, extreme way how different those paths were. Um, and so I knew I needed to start over. I mean, to be very honest with you, I knew at that point I need to take a big step back and reevaluate everything. And that felt like a very tall order, a big task. But I did, in hindsight, do something really well, which was to start with, okay, what is the very next step I need to take here?
Yeah. Because I can imagine it must have been so overwhelming, like you said, being away from family, going through a relationship crisis, and realizing that despite being a commitment girl, this commitment didn't feel good for you anymore. Being in a country that's foreign to you, being in a job that you're not crazy about, like that's a lot of things to go through at the same time.
It was, and so it was overwhelming in terms of now what, where do I start? What do I fix first? Because everything's on
Yeah.
fire.
Mm. So what did you fix first?
So what I fixed first was the career piece, because I had a clear end date with Samsung of when my existing contract would end. Now there was a little moment of, confusion there because Samsung actually did offer me a promotion and offered for me to stay at least another 2 years. And I had a moment of, being enticed by that too. But finally, I had a friend who I was talking with over Skype who knew all the crises I was going through the whole time, who said to me, Itir, you are done.
Sometimes you need that friend, right? That
Yes.
just says it
Yes.
for you and makes that decision for you.
He was a friend who just said, you are done here. You have overstayed, the amount of time you needed to stay. Even the 2 years was really like, frankly, like could have ripcord cut out earlier, right? So at that moment, he was my crystal clear messenger to really snap me out of it,
Yeah.
And so what I did was to reach back to a contact I had at Duke who I had met 5 years earlier at a marketing conference on campus. And took this card, the woman's card, and she at the time was in marketing at a company called Burt's Bees, which is headquartered here in Durham, North Carolina. It is a global brand. And so, but I know you have some viewers who may not be in a market where Burt's Bees has launched yet, but it is a natural personal care company. So I wanted to go back to what I did love before I left for Samsung, which was FMCG, CPG, marketing, brand management, a global view of that brand management, and the personal care industry. So I knew that much, and I knew this woman, and I had actually physically carried her business card with me over the 5 years, which is very unusual.
That's
Usually,
amazing.
I get someone's card and I put it aside somewhere, and maybe I contact them and maybe I don't. But something about this woman, I kept her card in my wallet. I mean, literally in the thing that day to day I open and use.
And 5 years later, she still had the same number.
Yes.
And she was still there, which is also pretty amazing, right? With all the career changes that people have.
Exactly. And I just want to say that it was early days of LinkedIn as well. It wasn't that commonplace to like find someone on LinkedIn and message them. I also want to share this part of the story for people out there who might feel discouraged. I was saying to myself, I didn't maintain this relationship. Like MBA best practice that's taught to you is you keep in contact. You reach out every 6 months, every year. You keep those contacts hot. And I never did. I physically carried her card with me, but I wasn't in touch with her. So it was, I felt like pretty much a cold call, to reach back out to her. Had no idea if she would remember me. But desperate times call for desperate measures. So I was like, I have to do this. I don't have a choice, really. I mean, I do have a choice, but I'm highly motivated to at least try this. So I emailed her and I didn't hear back. So nothing, not any kind of response. 3 weeks went by, a month went by, and I thought, in the meantime, I started looking for other jobs. And I thought, okay, I blew it. I didn't stay in touch with her, and she didn't remember me.
That's
And
interesting as well, right? That
yeah,
you blame it on yourself, like I blew it.
yeah, exactly. Totally my fault. And so right as I was thinking those thoughts, she emailed me back.
Wow.
And the truth was that she was on maternity leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot more sense, right? Instead, like I blew it.
Yes. So I share that as like an example of the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
How quick we are to make a assumption about what happened.
Mm.
And even to blame ourselves and build that into the story. I'd fully built this whole scenario that wasn't real. And the reality was she was on maternity leave. She was happy to hear from me. Oh, and by the way, there was a role opening open in marketing.
Wow.
Yeah, so she was able to pass my resume right to the VP of marketing, and I was able to get an interview the next week. We didn't have Zoom back then. I did my interview over Skype, and it was like 11 p.m. Korea time to line up with my American counterparts, and I was able to do it though, and I got the offer while I was still in Korea. So I think with about 2 months left on my contract, I did have an offer in hand from Burt's Bees. I knew I could, and Burt's Bees was located where my parents live here in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew it was what I needed to basically level set and start over, rebuild my life with my family and my support network around me,
Yeah.
and to go back to an industry and function I was really good at, familiar with, happy to go back to.
That's amazing. And that's so amazing that you chose what was good for you, right? Like even what age were you then?
I was
If you don't mind disclosing, since we're
yeah,
being transparent.
of course. I was 32 at that point, and I was 5 years out of business school. And another little important note there is the role was a junior role, so it was an associate brand manager role, and I really had to put my ego aside because my ego was telling me, "You're 5 years out of business school. You've already been a manager. You've been managing people. How could you go back to an entry-level individual contributor role?" So there was definitely conflict there between my ego and what I knew in my heart was the right thing for me. But luckily, thank goodness, this time my heart won over my head. And I was able to move back to North Carolina. I've moved back in with my parents at age 32. Which I know in Europe is not a big deal, but in the US, that's a big deal. I was able to just, be taken care of by my mom when I got home. And that bought me a little bit of time in deciding, how I was going to reconcile next steps for the marriage. So I think to answer your original question, it was like I started with one piece of all the things that needed to be addressed, and having that piece taken care of then left me room to manage and deal with everything else.
And I think that's such useful advice. Like if you feel that everything in your life is like falling apart or doesn't make sense anymore, like don't try to fix everything at the same time. Like take care of yourself, make sure you're in a better space, and then also make the bigger decisions. That's amazing. So I want to fast forward to quitting your corporate career and starting your own business.
Yes, the plot thickens.
Yes.
So fast forward, I went through a divorce. I got my feet back under me. Was thriving at Burt's Bees. Love Burt's Bees. My colleagues are my friends to this day. And now I have the pleasure of continuing to work with Burt's Bees in a different capacity, which I'll get into. So everything was going right. I was on track to be promoted, was being recognized for the work I was doing. So nothing was wrong. Sometimes people kind of need that pain to be the catalyst for what they do next, which can be
Mm,
very useful, as you saw in my earlier story. But in this case, it came from a different place for me, which was really this feeling of almost emptiness, I want to say,
mhm.
uh, where I was being externally applauded for what I was doing, but I didn't feel internally fulfilled by it.
Mhm.
So, there was something in me that was saying, this isn't it, Itir. Like, there's something more for you to contribute that is not getting expressed with you being a global brand manager at a company.
Mhm.
And in fact, the more senior you get, it's like the less likelihood is that this internal, more fulfilling role that I could have in the world was going to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
But that was a very difficult idea to swallow, because that was almost more terrifying than what I just described in the in transitioning out of Samsung, because this
Uh-huh.
time I didn't know where to go next. It was like,
Mm,
okay, well, I've already done my MBA. I've already tried all these different companies. I don't have a brilliant entrepreneurial idea on which I could start a company, right?
I love that it's always people looking for the brilliant idea, right?
I know you would tell me I didn't need one, but at the time I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Um, so all that said, what I did do was to pay more attention to that voice and to stop avoiding it, because, again, my rational brain would kick in and say, but you're making great money, you're being promoted, everyone loves you. What's the problem here? Like, just swallow it and keep going.
Yeah.
Um, but I was able to pay attention. And when I paid attention, I was listening more carefully to the conversations I was having. I happened to talk to this person who started talking about his life coach and how
Mhm.
his life coach really helped him make his transition from the corporate world to being a real estate investor. I got
Mhm.
really curious about this. I said, "Well, how? How did that happen? Because I probably need that. So please tell me, how does life coach do that for you?" And when
Mm.
he started to say, she really listened to me objectively. She created the space for me to figure out why I felt motivated to pursue, real estate, and also to face the realities of what would have to be true financially, for
Mhm.
me to be able to continue to support my family, and still pursue a completely different career path.
Yeah.
And that really perked up my ears, because I was like, "Oh my god, I love doing that." Like, the times at work where I've had a chance to do that, that has felt right. That has felt like really what I excel at. And so then I started researching, and I went down like a Google rabbit hole of like, what is life coaching? How do you get certified? Like, what are the different, certifying programs? How long would it take for me to be certified? How much would it cost, etc.? And so suddenly I had something very tangible to grab onto, that started from a really tiny spark, just one single conversation. Um,
Mhm.
but doing all that research made it come to life for me, and I just knew I wanted to do it. And I knew I couldn't go wrong with getting certified as a coach, because it's a great skill to have, like, no matter what you do.
Uh-huh.
So I went ahead and signed up, to get certified and to start that training program. And then once I did that, it became very clear to me that I was about to do the thing that I normally do of multitasking and sacrificing my own, well-being to do everything at once, and to not give up, my steady salary while pursuing this thing. Um, but I had a moment of clarity there too that said, no, it's going to be different this time.
I'm still
This,
commitment girl, but I'm gonna commit to myself.
yes, finally, let's commit to ourselves here, and why don't we just go all in on this dream? I'll say also, in parallel, at the time, I was working on writing a cookbook with my mom, a Turkish
Mhm.
cookbook of our family's recipes, and I was getting really frustrated at not having enough time to really pursue that and finish that project.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do both, and I said those are two things in and of itself that require full-time attention, and that's what I'm gonna do. So again, I'm so grateful to Burt's Bees and my team, because when I told them that, they were really just so they were shocked, but also, pretty instantly supportive, knowing
Hmm.
that is really what I wanted to pursue and to try out. And they really made me feel like I would always have a home at Burt's Bees if I changed my mind or if things didn't go the way I planned. So to be very honest, I went in with a lot of security, in those relationships that I had built as I was transitioning to this new opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it's also amazing how you leveraged your relationship with your former employer into a new relationship as a newborn entrepreneur.
Yes. Yes, Nienke. So basically what happened is I got certified. I was able to, be a solopreneur and start my own executive coaching practice. And I quickly, honed in on the type of client I would be, really honored to coach. And that client, is really that corporate warrior, who is, because I've been there myself, right? Who
Mhm.
is really looking, searching for more fulfillment and maybe unsure of where to start with getting more fulfillment, unsure whether that's even a question they deserve to ask. But at that point where they know something's gotta change, for them
Yeah.
to get more satisfaction. So I
Hmm.
focused on that, and I would say in some ways I've become a corporate warrior to a corporate healer, because I also work with clients, like Burt's Bees and other companies now, to build custom coaching programs for them, on the topics of leadership and, public speaking, a variety of different things to help people in that corporate environment succeed as well, and to get that support that a coach can really provide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love how you were able to leverage the situation and turn it around for your own benefit. And what I also love is how you actually spend your days these days. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, yes. So I have to say, the life that makes me smile, as you started with, really is one where I have now prioritized my health and well-being, to where, I wake up every morning and meditate for an hour. I am a
Hmm.
Vipassana meditator, for those who are familiar with that. I've been on a couple of big meditation retreats, 10 days silent, that have really changed my world. And so
Hmm.
meditation has become a real solid foundation for my day. And then, I'm able to have a leisurely breakfast, with my soon to be new husband, who I'm marrying next week.
Wow! Congratulations!
Yes, thank you so much. So we're able to just kind of start our day together. And then I'm usually working out or doing something outdoors. As you can see behind me, I live in the woods now, in nature, in a very rural environment, very different than Seoul. Uh,
Yes.
so I'm really able to prioritize those elements that feed me, nurture me, and only then do I
And
really.
literally as well, right?
Yes, literally as well. And so only then do I open the office, and start taking client appointments or planning or strategizing what I would do for my business. So it's a
Yeah.
completely different way of looking at life, where career and work had been the priority, before. It's completely flipped now.
Wow, that's amazing. And I also love the name you picked for your own company.
Yes. So it's insight meets action. And the reason why I chose that name is the most common question I get about coaching is, what's the difference between coaching and therapy? And as I've disclosed earlier, I'm a huge fan of therapy, still working with that same therapist for the last decade.
Yeah.
But succinctly, coaching is where that insight that you get meets the action that you're going to take. So,
Hmm.
really, the difference is that forward looking, bias, that look towards what are you building next? How is that going to serve you? And how are we going to get you from what you know about yourself today to where you would ideally be? So it's really right at that intersection of insight and action.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And of course, the world right now is going through a lot of changes. How has that impacted your business?
Great question. So what I've basically seen in my business is, clients who were with me pre-pandemic,
Hmm.
stayed with me and obviously took advantage of the support that coaching can provide in a time of such uncertainty. I have
Yes.
to be transparent though to say that understandably, new client interest really dropped off for a few months in
Hmm.
the beginning part of the pandemic because people were just trying to survive, literally,
Yeah.
just trying to figure out how do I get food and how do I live, with
And
everybody in my
toilet paper.
household. Yes, where am I going to get my toilet paper, and how am I going to have two full-time jobs, two partners in a household working with children,
Yeah.
all of those basics, right? So if we think of Maslow's hierarchy of just that, starting with that basic part of the pyramid of food and shelter,
Yeah.
that obviously got all kicked up, and people had to figure all that out again. Um,
Mm.
so what I've seen recently, I would say, and we're now, in October, is I would say towards the end of summer, heading into fall here now, people have been able to figure out their new normal, realize that they need to keep living, and actually have had the opportunity to ask really big questions that
Yeah.
maybe, without that break in the trajectory, they may never have gotten to. But now the client inquiries have turned back on, and the questions I'm getting are around, well, now how do I really build a lifestyle that's going to work for me? Now I know that
Yeah.
I'm never going to go back to commuting. I don't want to work in the office. Um, I have really enjoyed time with my family, and I'm not going to go and give that up again. I've
No.
had time to work out, and now my health and wellness maybe is in a little bit more of a focus. Or I gained, 15 pounds of COVID weight, and now what?
Yeah. I mean,
um,
it could happen, right?
yeah, it's real. I'm there with you.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. With me, I'm there too, but I
yeah,
also accepted that. It's fine. It is what it
yeah,
is.
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, but it's all started to raise questions,
Yeah,
and
that makes
coaching
sense.
is really the modality that can support a person in exploring those questions for themselves, right? Whereas a consultant would come in and give you advice on what to do
Hmm.
and make a plan for you. Coaching is about empowering you to reveal your own answers, the answers
Yeah.
that are already in there that maybe have been buried by years of expectations from external sources, or emotions that haven't been confronted, that have felt too painful to confront. So coaching really just helps pull all that good stuff out.
Yeah, and I love as well, like how your initial desire of creating a better world
Mhm.
has come true, and how you're helping other people create better worlds for themselves. Well, you had your own journey creating that better world for you, literally, where you live in nature, where you eat the food that you grow yourself, where you actually plan your whole day around yourself and then squeeze in the work you also still want to do, instead of the other way around, like yeah, having the company, especially also in Korea with the long working hours there, dictate how you can live your life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Nienke. I love that you made that connection because, again, hindsight being 2020,
Yes.
I'm now
And it is
and it is
2020.
2020, is that what drew me to marketing also
Yeah.
was a deep desire to understand people, to
Mm.
really understand what motivates them. Of course, I was using that information to convince them to buy things, whereas now I'm using that information to help them build a life that's going to serve them better.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the goal is what you described of changing the world one person at a time, to be frank. It's like if we can really raise a person's energy and how they're viewing their life and how they're building their world, then that automatically has a positive impact on everyone around them. And I would say I truly believe that we are, and I know that I've seen this in your materials as well, we are unique, right?
Yes.
And literally nobody else can be Nienke, nobody else can be Itir, and we have something to bring to the world that nobody else can bring. So if we are
Yes.
not our full selves, if we're not operating on full Nienke, full Itir, then the world has missed out. You know, there's no one else who can take the place. So even
Yeah.
if there are a million coaches out there, no one coaches like Itir. And so if I'm not pursuing being more of myself, then I've deprived everyone around me of what I have to offer.
I love how you say that, and I love how you're standing in your own strength and being 100% you and being 100% unique as well. And I love how you're using your gift to give back to other people.
Thank you so much, Nienke.
So for everybody that feels inspired, that feels that they can benefit from your services, where can they find you?
Well, thanks for asking. They can go to my website, itirkeskiner.com, which I'm sure, Nienke, you'll include in the support materials with this video.
We will for sure.
Yes, and on the website, one, they'll be able to learn even more about me and what I can offer, but also they'll find a link to book a free session to actually meet with me one-on-one for that coaching exploration process to begin. So all of that is at itirkeskiner.com.
I love that. And wherever you will be watching this or listening to it, we'll make sure that we share where to find Itir. But also, if you have any questions or comments about anything that you heard today, please also feel free to share with us, and we'll make sure you'll get your answer as well. All right. Well, I see it's a very sunny day at your site.
Yes.
So thank you so much for all transparency, for all the insights, for everything that you share with us today. And all the kind words as well. Thank you so much.
Oh,
like, thankfully, I'm wearing foundations. Otherwise, I would be blushing so much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Nienke. Yeah, this is really such an amazing, you know, I don't think we would have guessed when we were living in Seoul together that we would be having this conversation. So that in and of itself is very meaningful to me. And I really appreciate you having me today.
Thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, also, congratulations again for your wedding.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
Wedding in times of Corona.
Micro wedding.
Yes. But yeah, all the best wishes. And we'll talk again soon.
Sounds great, Nienke. Have a great evening.
I hope to grow in a way that I would look back and say, I think I did a good job by opening the doors of opportunities, both in person as well as online classes. And I think I made right choices by going to Nienke.